everyone. I'm Spiro, joined here today with two very special guests from the Newsbud team, Sibel Edmonds, the editor and founder of Newsbud and Boiling Frogs Post, as well as Filip Kovacevic, who is a geopolitical author, university professor, and the chairman for the Movement for Neutrality of Montenegro. He has a PhD and a BA in political science here in the U.S., and has visited as a professor at St. Petersburg State University in Russia for 2 years. Today we're going to be talking about an exclusive article that he wrote for Newsbud, Boiling Frogs Post, The Travels of a NATO Chief, Jens Stoltenberg. In this article, Filip Kovacevic talks about how we travel through places that are important to us, and through analyzing our travels, you can start to see a pattern and you can see what is important to that person who is traveling. And this can be applied to any one of us. So we are here today to talk a little bit about this article. This is the first time that this has been covered here. This is an exclusive article here. Filip, what led you down this path here to investigate the travels of this NATO chief, Stoltenberg?
I thought it was going to be easy to discover the agenda of NATO if we see where the NATO chief is traveling to. And not only do we discover the priorities of NATO, but perhaps we could also discover some of his future moves. And in fact, what I've discovered is that NATO's expansionist agenda is going on. You know, even though the reality on the ground is changing, this push for expansion is going on, which can be seen and is reflected in the travels of NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg.
Yes, this is a fantastic analysis and so revealing. And I was reading it the first time and a couple of things jump at me. And then the second time going through it, several things jumped at me even more so, because you have so many explosive nuggets actually buried in there that I just wanted us to have this discussion session and interview session and pose some of these questions, because I know you are trying to make the article, the analysis, brief enough, and some of the pointers in there you want to expand upon in your future article. So I don't want to take away from your coming articles, but one of the first things that got my attention, and the reason for it being, we have been screaming about the real alternative media versus the mainstream media and what we refer to as the pseudo-alternative media. And in this article, as part of the pattern and the travels that Stoltenberg has been going through, and there are tons of those, is this very interesting travel to Politico. That's the Politico publication. They have their print version of their news, but they're mainly online. And they established themselves, Politico, in 2007 as an alternative to mainstream media, interestingly. And basically a bunch of people who were basically previously a mouthpiece of the U.S. government, especially the CIA, together with Walter Pincus, they left they left Washington Post and a few people from Wall Street Journal, and they established this so-called alternative news outlet with the same group of people, the same establishment media that we were familiar with in terms of names and experience and background. And of course, there was nothing alternative. There has been nothing alternative about this publication. And not only that, they are pretty small. Their print publication, the print is not more than 20,000. I think it's somewhere around 18,000 copies that they sell. And their viewership per month is around 3 to 6 million hits per month. Yet they established an office in Brussels, and lo and behold, we have Jens Stoltenberg going to their opening ceremony and being a major presence there. And knowing who these people are, these horrifying people that we have been attacking as mainstream media, who are now posing as alternate to the mainstream media, I wanted you to a little bit expand upon this visit by Stoltenberg to Politico's not London office, which is usual, or Hong Kong office, which is usual, not the Paris office, again to be expected, but Politico's first international office being in Brussels, Belgium.
Yeah, Sibel, definitely. This is very, very interesting. It's not something I expected when I started this research, and then Politico popped up. Politico, in my opinion, is a component in the new strategy of NATO in Europe, of pushing for NATO's expansion. In other words, in Europe for a long time, we have had the usual suspects of the US public diplomacy or propaganda, such as the Radio Free Europe and the Voice of America. But obviously, the powers that should not be noticed that this was not enough. And they wanted to augment their propaganda potential by setting up another media. And this is Politico. And in fact, Politico is connected to another organization called the German Marshall Fund of the United States, yes, which for many years has been one of the key think tanks promoting NATO in Europe and beyond. And if you look at the board of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, you'll see that John F. Harris, who's the editor-in-chief of Politico, is there. In other words, we have a tight connection between Politico, organizational connection between Politico and the German Marshall Fund of the United States, which is supported by the German government as well as by many corporate sponsors. And in fact, Germany is extremely important for NATO. If you look at my analysis, you'll see that Jens Stoltenberg visited Germany the most in this time period that I looked at. And he also, not only did he meet with the leadership of Germany, but he also gave speeches to the meetings of political parties in Germany, both the right and the left, the Social Democrats. In other words, the support of the German political elites for NATO is crucial. And therefore, we see German Marshall Fund of the United States also strongly and financially supporting NATO soft power. And Victoria Nuland, one of the chief architects of the U.S.-Russian policy, of the misguided U.S.-Russian policy, has said recently that U.S. has invested up to $1 million more in the tools of soft power in Europe. And I think Politico is a part of that.
Oh, that's very interesting. Now, for our audience, I know that our regular followers, subscribers at Boiling Frogs Post now /Newsbud, they know where we stand. I have written about Washington Post and their CIA connection, and also I have referred to Politico in the past. But if you have new viewers here, please take a note of this. And next time you read any kind of coverage put forth by Politico, remember that who they are working for and how important they are for the same deep state and establishment that we are trying to counter and defer ourselves from. How about you, Filip? Have you, by looking at their coverage of anything NATO within Politico coverage, have you noticed any kind of specific pattern that has jumped at you, the kind of spin, the kind of tilt they put in their coverage?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, they are cheerleading for NATO. They're talking about NATO as the champion of democracy and human rights and political stability and economic prosperity, and all these words that sound really good, but in reality, it's all fake. It's propaganda that's couched in a technology and vocabulary that perhaps the U.S. middle classes would go for, and this is why. We need to tell our viewers they need to be careful. You know, Politico is, as you said, Sibel, an element of the deep state.
Well, thank you for making this point both in your article, but also emphasizing it here. And I know a lot of people, they are familiar. They know that Washington Post, New York Times, you know, all those garbage establishment tentacles are the establishment tentacles. But when it comes to these that are posing as alternative, please include Politico on your list. If you're subscribing, just unsubscribe from their website, their publication, and put it on your bucket of, this is a pretty large bucket of the pseudo alternatives posing as alternatives out there. My second question before I pass this thing to Spiro, thank you for hosting it, and thank you for having me on, Spiro, for this one, because this is extremely important, this article. I'm so glad that we got to publish it before you leave the country for your trip, Filip. Is, again, you lightly mention in this article Putin's visit to Greece and what took place in there between Putin and the Greek Orthodoxy Church and the significance of it. And I know that this is something that you are going to follow up on, and you have plenty to say, because as all of us who've been following this know, it's much more than some symbolic thing that took place. It's far more than some sort of a ceremonial event that took place. So I know your article is coming, but would you tell us a little bit about why this is so significant, Putin's visit, and what took place in Greece with the Orthodoxy Church?
This is very, very important. This is a big issue, and I'll be on top of it. I'll be writing about it in the future. What's happening here is that Putin is trying to get support for his policies, and he needs to find something, an idea that goes beyond Russian nationalism. And he found this idea in the power of the Orthodox Church. Now we have to look at religious history and understand that about 1,000 years ago, the Christian Church, the United Christian Church in Europe, split into two, into the Eastern Church and the Western Church. The Western Church became the Catholic Church, which later on split into many Protestant churches as well. So there were many splits later within the Catholic Church. The Orthodox Church came out of the Eastern Christian Church. And the Orthodox Church is not as united as the Catholic Church. In other words, what's happening in Eastern Europe is that different countries have different Orthodox churches. So instead of one Orthodox church, there are 14 of them. And so what Putin is trying to do at this point of time is to combine and connect all the Orthodox churches into one under the control of the Russian Orthodox Church, and then use the Orthodoxy as an instrument of the Russian friendliness in the region. What we have to remember when we look at the populations in countries like Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, and Russia is that the Orthodox Church gets a lot of respect. In fact, if you look at the public opinion polls, the Orthodox Church is the most trusted institution in these countries. So if somebody who's the chief of the Orthodox Church says something geopolitically, people will listen. And this is what Putin is counting on. And this is why it was so important that when he was in Greece, that he not only met with the Greek leadership, the Greek government, but he also went to visit the Orthodox monastic community on Mount Athos that was founded many hundred years ago, and that includes Russian Orthodox priests. In other words, the Orthodox Church will become a very important support for the Russian policy goals in the Balkans. And this exactly is what may lead in the end to the undermining of NATO. Because let's remember, Greece and Bulgaria are Orthodox countries, and yet at the same time they're members of NATO. However, the elites are beholden, the political elites of these countries are beholden to NATO, but not the people. The majority of the people are against NATO. And so with the help of the Orthodox Church, the animosity and the hostility and the opposition toward NATO is going to grow in these countries. And I expect that NATO begins feeling this very, very soon. And that I think that NATO is essentially losing out in the Balkans because of this Orthodox religious connection that Putin has used and is using for its own foreign policy goals.
That's very interesting. Another related question to this topic, now that you brought it up, signifies Turkey's role in this, because Turkey is outside Orthodoxy Church. It's the only Muslim country, nation. Azerbaijan is in line, is going to become a NATO member, but Turkey is. And considering the division, the divide, and the animosity between Turkey, the long-held, and Greece, and historical animosity between Turkey and Russia, and the current rift and the conflict between Russia and Turkey, Turkey being the NATO member. I wonder how much that comes into play and is signified by Putin's visit to Greece, and how would it ruffle the feathers with what's going on with Turkey? Because despite some of the severe ties, they still have a pretty large commerce ties, Russia and Turkey. That has been reduced tremendously in the past couple of years, but still the economic ties to a certain extent is there. And how does that come into play with Turkey and the situation with Turkey and what took place with Putin's visit to Greece?
These issues are very complicated. In fact, some of these issues may lead to the World War III. If we look at history, we'll see many centuries of animosity between Russia, the Russian Empire, and the Turkish or Ottoman Empire. And many issues there have remained unresolved. Greece, as you have said, is an Orthodox country, so religiously speaking, it's closer to Russia than to Turkey. And of course, if you look at history between Greece and Turkey, even recent history, you'll see that back in the 70s, there was a big violent conflict over the island of Cyprus, which to this day has still remained unresolved. So NATO, even though Greece and Turkey have been members of NATO since 1952, NATO has not been able to resolve these tensions. This is why talking about NATO as some kind of glue of the European civilization is false. All they are interested in is the growth of the military-industrial complex. They are not interested in genuine reconciliation between people who have been in conflict for a long time. Think about it. Greece and Turkey have been members of the same organization for more than 60 years, and yet they are still at the brink of a war. This means that this organization that combines them has failed. They have failed. And at this point of time, the situation is extremely complicated. We know that the relations between Turkey and Russia have deteriorated because of the downing of the Russian military plane by Turkey. And so we also have economic sanctions. We have many tough words. We also have the control of the Turkish military in terms of the Russian Navy ships going through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. And we have the issue of Istanbul, Constantinople, and so on. I mean, these are huge issues. I mean, we are talking about the tinderbox. And I'm afraid that some people in the West may actually try to provoke this conflict. In fact, I'm very pessimistic. And it seems to me it will only going to be up to let's say the coolness of Putin and Erdogan to prevent the conflict. And I think Erdogan has shown that he has not been very cool, and that he is apt to act irrationally and unexpectedly, and this may get him into trouble, because Turkey, after all, even though it has a very strong military, it cannot be a match to Russia. But it would definitely lead to many people getting killed. We also have to look at the Turkish, as Sibel, you know quite a lot about it, the Turkish activities in Central Asia, in the former Soviet republics against Russia, also in the Crimea with the Crimean Tatars. So we have so many hotspots in this region, and it may take just another little thing for all hell to break loose.
In your article here, you were talking about the first trip of Stoltenberg's since when he gained his position there as the chief of NATO. His first trip that he took was just 5 days later, and it was to Poland. And Poland just recently had a massive military drill, and where it was the largest presence of over 30,000 troops since the Cold War, right there on Russia's doorstep. Like, as you said, the whole area is in turmoil. But in your opinion, Where would the conflict most likely happen if there was to be one, or is this all just, all the military posturing on both sides, the Russian and the NATO alike? Is this just business as usual and saber rattling?
Well, here we are talking about the long-term geostrategic agenda that's more than 100 years old. If you read the works of one of the first American geopolitical thinkers, Admiral McMahon, you'll see that he thought that the emerging United States at the time as a global power would have three big enemies: Germany, Russia, and China. And he recommended the United States taking action against these countries. We know that action has been taken against Germany twice. World War I was against Germany, and World War II was against Germany. So Germany has become pretty much pacified, and NATO is a part of that, as we have discussed many times. Now Russia is the kind of the second country on this geopolitical plate, and the strategy used here is the strategy of encirclement. In other words, the strategy is to control the marginal areas around Russia. In other words, if you look at the geographic position of Poland, you'll see that it can control the north. And if you see the geographic position of Turkey, you'll see that it can control the south. So what you have from the European side is essentially pressure on Russia. And now with Ukrainian government based in Kiev, cooperating very closely with NATO, you have further pressure on Russia. To me, it is very revealing that the name of this plan, this plan that McMahon talked about 100 years ago, was called Anaconda. And the name of NATO exercises in Poland is also called Anaconda. And as you know, Anaconda is a type of snake that kills its prey the way by encircling it, by squeezing it, by making it come into itself. The way, geopolitically speaking, this is essentially what is done to Russia. Of course, the Chinese are a big enigma, because for this strategy to succeed, for the Anaconda to succeed, you have to have the Chinese on your side. And this is exactly what Kissinger and Nixon have accomplished during the Cold War. In fact, there has been quite a lot of animosity between the Soviet Union and China, even though they were both communist countries. And this was in a sense the success of the Nixon-Kissinger foreign policy at the time. Now China may be playing a different game. Now China may actually be on the Russian side, and this essentially would make it impossible to put pressure on Russia from the other side, from the east. And this would allow Russia to focus on the west. So what we have to do at this point in time is follow closely the relations between Putin and Xi, the Chinese president. Poland has always, if you look at Polish history, they have had a lot of traumatic events with Russia, but not only with Russia, also with Germany. In fact, Poland has at least 3 times been divided and disappeared from the face of the earth. And this is why it's very, and of course during the Cold War it was essentially occupied by the Soviet army. What's ironic at this point of time is that those Soviet military bases have been taken over by NATO. In other words, the Polish people are not free. They have simply exchanged one occupying power with another occupying power. So the way they were pushed against the West during the days of the Soviet Union, they are now pushed against the East by the NATO geostrategy. So I think the goal is to keep tension up. So we'll see even more exercises in the north. We'll see a lot of exercises not only in Poland, but also in the Baltic states, in Ukraine as well, even though Ukraine is not a member of NATO and will never become a member of NATO because it's a country that's split, that has lost control over a part of its territory, and NATO cannot, according to all of its rules. Of course, it can break the rules, but this would mean then complete anarchy for it. it could not accept a country that does not have the territorial issues resolved. So what we will see, a lot of tension in the north, but I expect that if there is a violent confrontation with Russia, that it will happen in the south, not in the north.
Well, definitely. Thank you both so much, Filip. Great article. I just have one more question here that kind of sparked my interest. Is this NATO chief's visits to several non-NATO countries, particularly in the Middle East here, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain. What do you make of this? Are they just furthering the central banking and military industrial complex agenda?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, they are trying to make a global NATO. And what we have in the Middle East and North Africa, we have two NATO-sponsored organizations. One is called the Mediterranean Dialogue. He has been around for about 20 years. In fact, Stoltenberg went there to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this organization. And we also have what's called the Istanbul Cooperation Council, which combines NATO member states with some countries in the Middle East and in the Persian Gulf. This is very important for NATO because they are afraid that other influences may come into the Middle East. And we are talking especially about the Russian influences, but the Chinese are present more and more. And in fact, I have to mention that the Chinese President Xi very recently visited Eastern Europe and signed quite a lot of economic deals with Eastern European governments. And the terms of service that he is giving to the European governments are very good. So in my opinion, what I'm seeing in Eastern Europe is the Chinese entering the game. They have a lot of money that they need to spend, and they are willing to give these governments a lot of benefits, and they are not requiring the governments to make cuts in their social services the way the IMF and the World Bank have done for a long time. So what we are seeing, especially in Eastern Europe, but also in the Middle East, is an extremely complex geopolitical game that will get even more complex as the time goes by, and as NATO essentially loses more and more of its power. In other words, if you look at if you read my article, you'll see that Stoltenberg has traveled quite a lot. However, his effectiveness has decreased. The effectiveness of what he can offer, what NATO can offer, is decreasing, and this is why I believe that NATO may start to may begin provoking some kind of a violent confrontation in order for all of these cards to be mixed up again, and for all of this to kind of get a new shape in which NATO could use war to expand further.
Well, I'm glad Spiro brought up Poland for several reasons. The reason you just delved into, but Poland not only with NATO, but also directly with the United States and with the CIA, has been playing some really, really major roles among all Eastern European countries out there. I would say Poland first, maybe Romania second. During this entire period, starting after 9/11, Poland was one of the first countries allowing CIA setting up black sites there, flying Gulf Streams in there, bringing people that they kidnapped and tortured. So one of the top first black sites by the CIA was established in Poland. And in fact, one of the first exposés on the existence of the CIA's black sites actually dealt with Poland. And once this became public around 2004, 2005, we witnessed a certain level of uproar from the people, the citizens in Poland, saying this is unacceptable and that their leader had participated in these really human rights violations in extreme levels. And to save face, of course, Polish government, they said they were going to have some court investigations and parliamentary investigations. They were going to look into it, And that kind of also quieted down, and we really didn't see much happening in Poland on that front. But why Poland so important, not only with NATO, as you just explained, but its willingness to be such a willing partner with the other snake. You mentioned anaconda, but let's talk about this other poisonous small snake, CIA, and its human rights violations and human rights in practices in violations of human rights in Poland, and be so receptive for it. And I know they got lots of grants right after 9/11. They started receiving a lot of aid from the United States. That's given, of course, the dependency game that always plays out in these nations. And but just a quick comments from you on the fact that Poland's role also in all these horrible, dirty games we've seen, kidnap, torture, black sites with the CIA.
You know, it's the divide and conquer is the old agenda. You mentioned something very important, Sibel, is the government, not the people. In fact, the Polish people could live well in peace and harmony with the Russian people and the Ukrainian people. It's the elites, the corrupt elites who have been put in charge of Poland, who are well connected with the deep state in the United States, who come to power and remain in power by playing ethnic games, games that will lead to further militarization of their society. And of course, further militarization is going to lead to further profit for the military industrial security complex. So we are talking about corrupt elites who do not care about, because if there is a war, they won't die. They will be saved. Just look at the tragic wars in former Yugoslavia. Not a single politician, not a single general died. But 150,000 of ordinary people, women, and children were killed. So the same if there is a war in Turkey or Poland, you know, the people at the top are not going to die. So what we need to see in these countries, and we are seeing that, is some kind of popular revolt. And we may see even more of that in Europe as time goes by. Of course, what we have to be careful about for this revolt, the genuine revolt, the cry of anger and rage from the people, not to be manipulated by the geopolitical agendas of other countries. In other words, if you look at revolutions in history, you'll see there were also geopolitical weapons against the country that was affected by the revolution. You know, the way the Germans supported the Russian Revolution and the British supported the French Revolution and the French supported the American Revolution. So it wasn't only about freedom, equality, and justice. It was also about getting back at your geopolitical opponent. So what we may see in Europe is, genuine cries of anger being supported by the other side, by the Russians and the Chinese against the West.
Well, that's a great point there. Absolutely. And definitely want to thank both of you for joining today here, Sibel and Filip Kovacevic. And well, you can find the link for this article here below. And we're looking forward to having some more exclusive articles from Filip Kovacevic very soon. Boiling Frogs Post and Newsbud.
Definitely. Thank you, Spiro. Thank you, Sibel. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.